Hello, let's do a May reading wrap up. So I read 12 books in the month of May, and let's just start talking about them. So the first book I read was Rose House by Arkady Martine. This was a sci-fi novella. It's only a couple hours long, so definitely recommend checking that one out if you just need something quick to dive into. But this book is about a AI house. So for all my millennials out there, picture Smart House from the 90s. And when the architect of this house dies, he leaves it in his will to his former estranged protege who lives overseas. And she gets called up because the local police force has gotten a call that there is a dead body inside of Rose House, but only the protege. Read A Season of Light by Julie Iromuanya. This was a book of the month pick for me. And honestly, to be completely honest, I thought it was just a bit too short, but this tackles the topic of the 270 something 276, I believe, Nigerian schoolgirls who were abducted in the mid 2010s, like 2013, 2014, I believe. And it sends Fidelis, a Nigerian immigrant and former POW from the Nigerian Civil War, sends him into a bit of a mental spiral. He is extremely triggered by this event because he lost his sister during the Civil War, and since all of these girls are the same age as his sister was when she was lost, he just can't handle it. And so he locks up his teenage daughter in her room. And what I thought, it hit all the beats I thought it was going to, because we follow each of the family members as they sort of reckon with this traumatic event and try and figure out what's happening with their dad. It writes from each of their perspectives, but I just don't think it went deep enough with each of the perspectives to have the emotional and full impact that I was expecting. So for me, this was like a 3 stars. Then I really did most of my reading in the back half of the month. But then I finished 11/22/63 by Stephen King. This was 5 stars. I loved this so much. I went into this thinking that this was going to be more heavy sci-fi because it is time travel. Our main character, Jake, is from 2012 and he's going back in time starts in 1958, obviously, then lives for a couple years and then ends up at the JFK assassination in 1963. And so, yeah, I thought it was going to be a lot more about the time travel-y aspect. And obviously that element is there, but this is way more of a slice of life and a love story and an ode to the power and the impact of teaching, and really just like character work for Jake himself, an exploration of who he is as a person. But I adored this. I love this so much. It's thick, it's long, but this went really quick for me. And I'm just so happy I picked it up. This was so, so good. Then I reread Savor by Tarah DeWitt, but I immersion read this. I listened to the audiobook and physically read it and just had a lovely time. The audiobook was incredible and I cried, and it's still a 5 stars for me, and Sarah DeWitt is still my favorite contemporary romance author. So really no surprises there. Then I listened to Horus Rising by Dan Abnett. This is a Warhammer 40k book, so my husband and I have an agreement. He is reading the Sun Eater series, and so I am reading some 4 Warhammer books with him. So yeah, it was good. It's not 100% my cup of tea, but as sort of like an introduction into this story and this world, I thought it was solid. Then we had Left It Forever by Tarah DeWitt. I reread Savor It in preparation for this coming out, and no surprises. Again, this is 5 stars. I read this in February. We're not really shocked. Second chance romance. We're introduced to these characters in Savor It, and the payoff of their emotional reconnection and their story is just incredible. And what's hard with some second chance romances, particularly if you have a divorced couple, is the reason they broke up the first time makes sense, and then they just kind of change their mind. But makes sense in a way that you don't think that they would be able to get over. This one makes sense why they can like emotionally process and get over it, and work past it together. And I just loved it. I love these two. I'm so happy this book exists, and you should go read it. It's incredible. And to me, this proves the power of the contemporary romance genre, because while this might appear to be a funny, silly, sexy book, it is all of those things, and yet it is so much more, and that's just why I love this genre so much. Then I read The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. So here we have a completely creative and unique fantasy setting. Um, and we're kept in the dark on a lot of this culture's origins, which is really fascinating. So basically, all we know is that our main character is a people that traveled across the seas to this new land, warred with the people who lived there, and then colonized. And they, you know, established this empire. And then they've been warring with the local populations for generations. And so there's a prologue that then we read the prologue of like the initial like landfall, and then we jump forward like 200 years or so, I think. And because we're kept in the dark, I have so many questions, and I'm so curious to see about the expansion of the world building and about these two cultures that are battling together. And then amidst that, we have Tao, who starts out as a very just typical like young person who is like all bark and no bite. He wants to have these great battles. He wants to jump in and speak against the indignities that he sees, and yet he can't actually stand up for himself. And so after a really traumatic event in the first couple of chapters, he goes on this incredible revenge slash training arc. And so we get a lot of chapters of training. So if that's not your thing, then be aware of that. But what I loved about taking that time to show us how Tao is like doing all of the work to get better is when he then becomes, spoiler, extremely, extremely talented and a really strong fighter. We believe it. We've seen how hard he's worked for it. And it's not the typical like chosen one where the 16-year-old picks up a sword and all of a sudden they're like the best fighter there ever was. So I loved the foundation of this. I thought this was an incredible first book, and I cannot wait to get to The Fires of Vengeance. I will be picking that one up this month because it just was so good. Read this. 5 stars. I was blown away. Then I read Still Life with Bones by Alexa Hagerty. I listened to this through the library. This book is about a social anthropologist, the author, who goes to some dig sites and a couple of different sites of genocide in South America. So we learn about the Guatemalan conflict and genocide, and then there's a couple other ones I'm not going to try and remember off the top of my head. That's the main one I remember because I've learned a little bit more about that one in the past, so like stuck in my brain a little better. Thought it was really powerful and really moving, and it did have some good commentary on like all of the scary things that governments do, not just to control people, but then also to pretend like the atrocities they commit never happened. And so it's a very important book. However, the author's like conclusion for the whole story was that she wants to stop doing field work, stop working in anthropology, and she wants to shift into doing advocacy work and try and prevent genocides from ever happening again. Seems like a very noble cause. However, in my exploration of her social media, I did not see any comment on any of the current atrocities happening at the moment. So there was no mention of Palestine, no mention of the Congo or Sudan, and so some of that all just left a bad taste in my mouth. And so for now, this is a 1 star, and I have a hard time recommending it because I'm not sure that the author is free from bias. I mean, that seems like a silly thing to say because no one is free from bias, but I just assumed that if your point was that you wanted to become an advocate, that you would advocate. I'll leave that there. Okay. Then I finally finished Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zeng. I picked this up through Aardvark last month, and I took a very long time to read this, almost a month, which is not really like me, especially because it's a really short book. But this is a horror novel slash mystery novel about a woman, Cora Zeng. Something really traumatic happens to her at the beginning of the book, and then a couple months go by. This is at the beginning of COVID, by the way. A couple months go by, and she gets a job as a crime scene cleaner. And then they start to notice a pattern, her and her coworkers, they start to notice a pattern that every single victim that they are cleaning up after was a woman of Asian descent. And they are starting to find dead bat carcasses and sometimes live bats at the scenes of these crimes. And so this talks about the incredible, vehement, and rampant racism that happened towards Asian people during the COVID pandemic, as they were essentially blamed for the pandemic, especially in America. And yeah, so I thought it tackled all those topics really well, but Cora has contamination OCD. It's not explicitly stated, but when she talks about her experiences, like with her therapist and with intrusive thoughts and things like that, it becomes very clear that that's what she's dealing with. And while I do not specifically have contamination OCD, I do struggle with intrusive thoughts. And so even though I thought it was depicted extremely, extremely well, that made this a hard read because we're in Cora's head. But I loved the way that this pulled in Chinese mythology and sort of the ghost lore in that culture. And this is just incredible. It was creepy, but also incredibly moving. And the only reason that I'm giving it a 4-star is because of that personal enjoyment aspect, that it was, because I tend to try and rate what I think on, plot, setting, characters, things like that. And then that final element that I take into consideration is personal enjoyment. And so because this was triggering, I stars, and I have no problems recommending it, just with that caveat of be careful if you struggle with some of the same things that I listed. Okay. Then Problematic Summer Romance came out, and I read this in like a day and a half. I love Not in Love, so that was the first book, and the two characters in Not in Love are Rue and Elliot, and after they get together in the book, this is their destination wedding in Italy. And so we have an age gap romance between Elliot's younger sister and Elliot's best friend, Connor Harkness. I thought this handled the age gap trope perfectly. She did a great job establishing certain um, certain truths about these characters that made them a little bit more on a level playing field. So they did not meet in a professional setting. They did not meet in a school setting. There was no, like, he didn't know her. Like, he knew her technically as a kid just because he knew Elliot, but he wasn't in her life. He didn't hang out with her when she was a kid. He doesn't have that like creepy, like she was a temptation type of BS that sometimes we see in these age gap romances. And because of that, it made it a lot easier. I actually believe that sisters could like still be together, that they could last and they could make it. And then all of just Ali Hazelwood's incredible writing and humor and tension building, this just delivered, all while giving us really awesome emotional beats with Elliot and Rue. And I particularly loved getting to see an outside perspective on Rue because she's very much autistic coded in Not in Love. She's reserved. She doesn't catch on to a lot of things in the same way. She doesn't emote in the same ways as other people. And so she can come off as really cold, which is a really difficult push to be. And getting to see Maya's perspective on Rue and how much Rue and Maya love each other. I just love that. And I thought that was really sweet. So if you really liked Not in Love, then it's really fun to see that aspect here in Problematic Summer Romance. And I knew I was going to love this. And I'm just so happy I wasn't disappointed. So yeah, 5 stars. Then I finished Dune, totally on a different, opposite, separate, separate category. We have Dune by Frank Herbert. And this went by a lot easier than I thought it would. I have this, what do you want to call it? I have this stigma, I guess, or I have this bias that anything like more than 20 or 30, 40 years old is going to be dense and hard to read and completely unrelatable. But truly, the reason this is a 5-star read for me is because the character of Lady Jessica, her characterization and her motivations and her journey, I thought were incredible. And I'm honestly in awe that such a well-written female character exists from the 60s. But yeah, and then I watched both the movies. I was doing the Page to Screen Club with Chris and Mads, and that was such a delightful experience. I loved hearing their thoughts on the adaptations and the book, and yeah, it was just a really fun month. I'm so hooked in on that Patreon club. I love the Page to Screen adaptations. I think it's so fun. So yeah. I don't think I will be continuing with the series though, because I've heard mixed things about the rest of the books, and to be honest, I'm kind of happy with just leaving this as is, even though it doesn't necessarily like conclude in a super satisfying way. I'm fine. I'm fine with it. And then finally, I finished Gideon the Ninth, literally in the nick of time, like evening of the 31st, I finished Gideon the Ninth. And wow, I can't believe, I think I started this book last spring, which is crazy. I don't know why I kept putting it off, why I kept forgetting about it. But sometimes I do this, and let me know if you guys too. Sometimes when I know a book is going to be really good, it's like, I feel like, oh, I'll get to it eventually because like I know I'm gonna love it. And that's just such a silly way to like think about it. But I had it on Kindle, but I also was listening to it, and Moira Quirk does just an incredible job narrating. The humor and everything with the world building was just so creative, so unique, and we truly went from this like interesting, slightly confusing, like tense situation to just the most emotional, jaw-dropping, tense, crazy ending. And I'm waiting for my copy of Harrow the Ninth to come in. And I will be reading that this month because I can't wait. I need to know what happens next, truly. But yeah, that is everything I read in May. It was such a great reading month. I think we had, let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 5-star reads? That's crazy. Amazing month. Amazing month of reading. Don't know what that sound is. I'm so sorry. I think my upstairs neighbors are moving furniture or some craziness, but that's what that is. Okay, so we're done that. And then now let's do my June TBR. So if you watched my Pride video, you'll see a couple of the books that I want to read, but we're going to chat through everything I want to read. So starting off, as always, with my book club books. For the Brady and Rosie book talk, I will be reading One Golden Summer by Carly Fortune, which is perfect because I bought it last month and I didn't read it. So, bing, we're going to read it. Don't know what that sound effect was. Don't ask me. Then for Aardvark, I picked up Starving Saints by Caitlin Starling. This is sapphic gothic horror with cannibalism. Sounds great. Also, all of the like special edition branding was all bee related, so I'm very curious to see what that's all about. What's next? Then for Chris and Mads, so they have 2 tiers in their Patreon. They have their regular tier and then their fellowship tier. And normally the fellowship tier is it started in January when we actually read Lord of the Rings, but they've maintained it as a place to do like their all-time favorites. So the picks so far have been Lord of the Rings, Two Towers, The Return of the King, then Sense and Sensibility, then Dune, and now Emma, which is really sweet because they're doing the Jane Austen ones with their mom, and they're bringing their mom on the pod, which is just adorable. But yeah, so we have Emma, and I have read most of the Brontes catalog. That's probably one of the strongest areas I have like in my classics repertoire, but I've never read any Jane Austen. So this will be my first one, and I'm looking forward to doing it in a book club setting because I think it will keep me accountable, because already on Sunday I tried to start it and I got 14 pages in and I was just a little bit bored, and what I really wanted to do is just read Assassin's Apprentice. So we'll talk about that in a second. But that's their fellowship tier is Emma. And then their regular tier, they're doing Murderbot. So I tried to do some Googling to see which of the novellas and novels the Murderbot TV show season 1 will be covering. And they said it was just going to be All Systems Red, which is the first Murderbot novella. However, that novella is only 3 hours long. And spoiler, disclaimer, skip ahead if you don't want to hear. Everything that happens in that novella, it's like they land on the planet, they go do the survey, one of them gets hurt, he brings them all back, they try and figure out what's happening, they go see this other crew, there's a scuffle, and then they get out of that situation, they go to another planet, Mensa buys out Murderbot's contract and tells it that they're going to take it home with them. And then Murderbot is like, I don't want to do that piece. And Murderbot like runs away from this team. I feel like that could be one episode or like maybe 2 episodes. So I have started, instead of just reading All Systems Red, I have now listened to the first 4 novellas of Murderbot, just because I want to potentially avoid any spoilers when I start watching the TV show. So we'll see, but I'm really excited. The TV show looks great. Alexander Skarsgård, we'll put him here, is playing Murderbot, and the novellas are just delightful. They're really just such a good time, and I would highly recommend listening to them because it really just brings to life Murderbot's like dry humor and also the the absolute unwillingness to recognize how much it loves its humans, even though it obviously loves its humans. Like I'm utterly charmed by Murderbot, so having a really good time with that, and really just can't. There's nothing else to say. It's just really good. You should just go read it. Okay, so then that gets us to Assassin's Apprentice. Assassin's Apprentice. So, as we are obviously aware, I'm a big participant in the Chris and Mads Patreon. In July, they are doing Ship of Magic, which is not a page to screen, but I think it's going to be like indicative of the fact that it's one of Maddie's, if not Maddie's favorite series of all time. So it fits like the favorites, distinction. But because they're starting with Ship of Magic, which Maddie argues is a really perfect way to get into the realm of the Elderlings because she personally finds it more accessible, that's technically book 4 out of the 16 book series. And even though there will not be spoilers for Farseer in Ship of Magic, and even though you technically could do either one, especially because I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe book 7 will pick up where book 3 leaves off. Some people lose steam during the live ship traders because they just want to follow Fitz's journey. So logically, I fully understand why that's a decision that some people make to tackle the series that way. I need to read it in order. So there's a group of like 40 to 50 people from the Patreon who are doing all of the Farseer trilogy in June, and I'm about a quarter of the way through this, and I'm loving it. I'm getting that like tingly feeling in the back of my brain that this is going to be one of my favorite things I've ever read. And isn't that just such a joy to know from the start that something that you're reading is going to be something that you're going to really love? So having a great time with this, and I can't wait to continue because if I'm already enjoying this, which a lot of people say is one of their least favorite books of all 16, then all we can do is go up from here, and I'm already loving this. So I'm here, Robin Hobb. You got me already. Okay, new releases. We only have 2 new releases that I'm like really, really prioritizing getting to this month. But we have Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. This is perfect. Sapphic Vampires during Pride Month. What more could you ask for? Then we have King of Ashes by S.A. Cosby. I adore S.A. Cosby's work, and I particularly am obsessed with his audiobooks. All of his audiobooks are narrated by Adam Lazar White, and he just does an impeccable job. He has this most amazing voice, but he also does, it's the perfect match of the sound of his voice with S.A. Cosby's like Southern noir charm in his writing, and I just love it. So I will be picking that up on audio when it releases. I believe that's next week coming out. Not sure. We'll see. Okay, then I'm still trying to do my 1 nonfiction book a month, and even though last month it was a little bit of a flop, this month I am going to be reading A Rome of One's Own by Emma Sutton. This is all about, it specifically says the forgotten women of the Roman Empire, so some less commonly known female figures of the Roman Empire, and I think this will be a really fun sort of entry point into Roman history because I know like basically nothing about it. But the reason that I want to start dabbling into some Roman history is so many fantasy and sci-fi series are heavily inspired by the Roman Empire. So the 2 that come to mind mainly are Sun Eater, which I have read, and then The Will of the Many, which I have not yet read. And I just think it would be cool to have a little bit of a foundation for, where these stories are inspired from. So yeah, I will let you know if I like it. I'm sure I will. I've heard so many good things about this author, and my rough plan is once I read this one is to just go through and read her other books because I've heard so many people highly recommend her stuff. But we will see what I think. Okay, so then I absolutely am going to be trying to make time for Fires of Vengeance because I just have to know what happens next, and yeah, I'm just excited about it. So we've got that one. Also, the first book ended on such a crazy, not a cliffhanger. Well, no, a cliffhanger. But also the political intrigue just completely blew up. So I'm just very excited to see what happens next. Then, my best friend and I, we are working on a podcast together. And so one of the things that we wanted to do, we wanted to be like chatty and funny and casual and just sort of like about hers and my relationship and talking about like female friendships and things like that. But then with that, we want to do deep dives where we will present things to each other. So she's a huge history nerd, so she will be presenting history topics to me. And then I'm a big reader, obviously. And so I will be presenting books to her. And so one of the first ones that I thought would be fun, or she and I thought would be fun, is Native Son by Richard Wright. We went to high school together and we read this in our 11th grade AP Lang class. And so we thought it'd be kind of like a fun blast from the past. And then she's going to do some like 19, what would that be? 1930s, 40s history topics along with it. But yeah, you will be seeing that eventually. I don't know, I can't remember how like readable this is, if it's going to be dense or not. I remember it being fairly easy to read. I remember getting through this really quick when I was in high school. So hopefully I'll be able to read that, but if I don't finish it this month, it'll just roll into next month and then eventually I will be on here promoting my podcast to you guys and then you will know. So there's that. And then, like I said, we're going to do Royal Assassin, Assassin's Quest, try and get all of those done. And then a couple for Pride Month. I have, in addition to some of the ones I've already mentioned, which would be Starving Saints and Bury Bones in the Midnight Soil. So in addition to those two, there are 3 more books I want to get to that have queer themes. The first one is A Lady for a Duke by Alexis Hall. This is a Regency era romance, historical romance, but where the female main character is a trans woman. And I cannot wait to see how that element of the story sort of turns these tropes on its head or interrogates these tropes. I'm just very, very curious, and hopefully it will be good. I'm sure it will. I've heard good things about it. Then I'm going to be listening to Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle. Everyone raves about Bury Your Gaze, and so I will read that eventually, but Camp Damascus was on sale a couple weeks ago on Libro FM, and I am obsessed with Libro, and so every couple weeks I go and I check their sales, because you can grab audiobooks for like $1 or $2. So I grabbed Camp Damascus, and so this will be my first Chuck Tingle, and I'm excited about it. I've heard great things. Then, like I said earlier, I will be reading Harrow the Ninth. I can't wait to see what happens. So, very excited. Let me see. Moving into transitioning, I suppose, into my library books for the month. I have Chlorine by Jade Song on Libby. And this, I believe, is also like a queer coming of age story. So I think it actually ticks both boxes. It'll be Pride Month, but it'll also be another library book. And then I also need to finish Ring Shout by P. Jelly Clark. I'm like 60% of the way through, which means I probably could finish it in like an hour. But yeah, I just need to get to that because it's really, really good. And it's just a holdover from last month. And then that's already a ton of books. I don't actually think I'm going to get to all of those. But at some point, I really want to get to The Night and the Moth because I've heard so many incredible things. But if this ends up back on my physical TBR and I have to add it to my spin the wheel, then that's fine. I will happily do that because it will, when I'm ready to read it, I'm sure I will love it. And yeah, in the meantime, this gorgeous, beautiful copy can just sit on my shelves. I'm really trying to not buy books right now, but I do have a good number of pre-orders for the year. I think at this point I probably have 8 to 10 more books that will be coming in just from pre-orders. And so naturally, even though I will be trying to get to any of those new releases as fast as I can, there's a good chance that they will end up I'm sure some of them will end up on my wheel of shame, but I'm just really trying to increase the ratio of read to unread. I'm not gonna say that I want to get to 0 because I don't think I ever will. Like, that's just the nature of being a book lover, is that you're constantly picking up books. But I think for me, I will feel really, really satisfied if I have less than 30 that I have not read. Because what I really want to do is, like, when I look at my bookshelves, I want to just see favorites. I want to see things that I love. I want to see things that I recommend. If someone were to come into my house and look at my bookshelf and say, "Oh, what do you think of James by Percival Everett?" I don't want to say, "Oh, like, it's really good. It won these prizes." No, I like it did. I want to say what I thought about it. And I just something feels a little weird about having tons and tons of books that I just haven't read. I want this to be a reflection of who I am as a reader, and also for you guys. If you see something behind me and you ask about it, I want to be able to talk about it and actually give like a legitimate recommendation. So right now I think we're sitting at about 75 unread books. And so if we could get that number under 30 by the end of the year, I will feel really, really happy. So there's a long one. There's a chatty video for you guys. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you have a wonderful summer, and let me know everything you're excited to read over the next couple of months. I just would love to talk to you guys. And in the meantime, I will catch you in the next one. Bye, guys.